She told me she never wants kids. Kids are disgusting and I'm too good for that life. I agreed. Then I found prenatal vitamins and text to her ex. I want your baby. He's too disgusting and doesn't deserve children with my genetics. When I confronted her, she smirked. He has superior genes unlike your pathetic DNA. I deserve better offspring. I didn't argue, just sent everything to her parents and his wife. And now they are panicking. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Throwaway account because some people know my main. This happened over the last few months, and I'm still processing it all, but figured you guys would appreciate the story. Fair warning, this gets pretty dark. So I'm gonna start with the moment everything clicked, because that's when I knew my life was about to change forever. Picture this. It's 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was staring at my phone when my girlfriend Rachel walked out of our bathroom holding a pregnancy test. Not just any pregnancy test, one of those expensive digital ones that literally spells out pregnant in case there's any confusion. She's crying. Happy tears. Or so I thought. Brian, oh my God, we're having a baby. Now here's the thing. Rachel and I had been together for almost 2 years, and the entire foundation of our relationship was built on us both being child-free. Like, aggressively child-free. She used to go on these rants about how kids ruined people's lives, how she'd never be one of those women who threw away their careers for diapers and sleepless nights. I'm talking passionate, almost angry speeches about maintaining independence. But people change, right? Maybe she'd had a change of heart. Maybe we'd grown closer and she felt ready for that step. So I did what any decent boyfriend would do. I hugged her, told her we'd figure it out together, asked how she was feeling. What I should have done was pay attention to how calculated her reaction was, how she kept glancing at my face to gauge my response, how she immediately started talking about timing and doctor's appointments, and making sure we did everything right. The first weird thing happened about an hour later. I was making coffee and mentioned calling out of work to go with her to confirm everything with a doctor. She got this panicked look and said no. She'd handle it herself. When I asked why, she said she wanted to process everything before involving me in the medical stuff. Red flag number 1. Who doesn't want their partner at the first pregnancy appointment? But I let it slide because, honestly, I was still in shock. We'd been careful. Not perfect, but careful. Sometimes stuff happens, right? The second red flag came that evening. Rachel was on her laptop, which wasn't unusual, but she kept angling the screen away from me. When I walked behind her to get something from the kitchen, she minimized whatever she was looking at real quick. When I asked what she was working on, she said, just pregnancy stuff, research, and forums and things. Okay, fair enough. New pregnancy, lots to learn. But then I noticed her phone face down on the counter, buzzing constantly, like every few minutes. When I mentioned it, she said it was probably her mom, who'd been texting nonstop since Rachel told her the news. Except Rachel had specifically told me she wasn't planning to tell her parents until after the first doctor visit. That's when the little voice in my head started whispering that something was off. Not wrong, exactly, just off. I wish I'd listened to that voice sooner. Actually, scratch that. I'm glad I didn't, because if I'd confronted her right then, I never would have discovered the full scope of what she was planning. And I definitely wouldn't have been able to orchestrate the beautiful, karma-filled destruction that followed. See, I work in insurance. Specifically, I investigate fraud cases. I spend my days looking for inconsistencies, following paper trails, documenting lies people tell when they think nobody's watching. It's made me naturally suspicious, but also methodical, patient. So instead of confronting Rachel about the weird behavior, I decided to do what I do best, investigate. That decision changed everything. When your gut tells you something's wrong and you've got the skills to find out what, you use them. Wednesday morning, after Rachel left for her marketing job, I took a closer look around our apartment. We'd been living together 8 months. She'd moved in when her lease expired for financial convenience. Split rent, shared utilities, the whole thing. Nothing seemed obviously out of place, but I noticed she'd been getting mail from places I didn't recognize. Random stuff she'd grab before I could see the return address. I'd chalked it up to online shopping, but now it felt significant. I also realized I couldn't remember the last time we'd been intimate. Really couldn't remember. Had to be at least 6 weeks. Maybe longer. For a couple supposedly surprised by an unplanned pregnancy, that timeline was interesting. Thursday, I decided on some light digital reconnaissance. My insurance training was screaming that the story didn't add up. Rachel uses the same password for everything, her childhood dog's name plus birth year. She told me this months ago when she asked me to grab something from her laptop. When she left it open after rushing to work, I took a look. Her browser history was enlightening. Pregnancy websites made sense, but also searches like how to tell if pregnancy test is accurate, false positive pregnancy tests, and how long after conception do tests show positive. Weird searches for someone supposedly surprised by her pregnancy. The really interesting stuff was in her email. 3 weeks of correspondence with Trevor Martinez. The name sounded familiar. Emails about meeting up and discussing their situation and making sure everything was handled properly. Then I saw an email from 2 weeks ago that made my blood run cold. Rach, talk to my lawyer friend like you asked. If you're both listed as possible fathers on the birth certificate, it gets complicated. But the guy who signs first and acts as the father has the stronger legal position, especially if there's been financial support during pregnancy. Just something to keep in mind for timing purposes. T. Possible fathers, plural. Trevor Martinez was Rachel's ex from college. She'd mentioned him as someone she'd dodged a bullet with, supposedly too controlling and possessive. So why was her terrible ex giving her legal advice about paternity? I kept digging. Trevor wasn't just some random ex. He was married. 3 years, according to his social media. Married to Sarah, a flight attendant who posted constantly about their perfect life. Sarah's job required constant travel. Her Instagram showed she'd been out of town 3 days a week for 2 months, always posting from different cities. When I cross-referenced those travel dates with Rachel's late nights at work and weekend shopping trips, the pattern was unmistakable. Every time Sarah was out of town, Rachel had been mysteriously busy. I felt sick. Deep, bone-deep nausea when you realize someone you trusted has been lying to your face for months. But I also felt cold, calculating anger. The same feeling I get building fraud cases when pieces click into place. Rachel wasn't just cheating. She was pregnant with another man's baby and planning to pass it off as mine. The legal research, timing concerns, careful management of my reactions, all part of an elaborate con. But cons only work if the mark doesn't know they're being played. I had to choose, confront Rachel immediately, or keep digging to see how deep this went. The smart play, the insurance investigator play, was gathering more evidence. In fraud cases, you never tip your hand early. The best prosecutions happen when you have so much documentation the defendant can't explain it away. So I kept building a case. I set up basic surveillance. When Rachel said she was going somewhere, I'd note time, location, stated purpose. When she returned, I'd note mood, appearance, behavioral changes. I screenshotted everything. Weird emails, suspicious texts, story inconsistencies. Created a folder on my work laptop. Personal R situation. What I found was worse than I'd thought. This wasn't passionate affair gone wrong. This was calculated planning to use me as backup, while she tried locking down her first choice. Rachel had reconnected with Trevor 4 months ago. Social media flirting escalated when they discovered his wife's travel schedule gave them regular opportunities. But Trevor wouldn't leave his wife. He wanted the affair, and his comfortable married life. Rachel was getting impatient. She'd moved in with me for convenience, but saw Trevor as the bigger prize. The pregnancy was her attempt to force his hand. She'd been tracking her cycle, timing our intimacy to make me a viable baby daddy candidate while maximizing conception chances with Trevor. The plan: tell both of us we might be the father, then use the legal system to her advantage. If Trevor stepped up and left his wife, she'd go with him. If not, she'd stick with me and let me raise Trevor's kid while trying to win Trevor back. I was never a boyfriend. I was a financial safety net with functioning reproductive system. Rachel wanted to play games with people's lives? She was about to learn some people are much better at games than others. By the following Friday, I had what I needed to confront Rachel about the affair and the pregnancy situation. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. See, I'd realized that catching her in the lie was only the beginning. She could admit to everything, apologize, move out, and basically get away with attempting one of the most manipulative betrayals I could imagine. That wasn't enough. I wanted her to face real consequences. The kind that would make her think twice before trying this shit with someone else. So I decided to start with a subtle probe, something that would reveal more about her plan without letting her know I was onto her. Friday night, we were having dinner. Takeout Chinese, nothing fancy. And I brought up the pregnancy in a casual way. So I've been thinking about the baby situation, I said, watching her face carefully. We should probably start talking about practical stuff, like how we want to handle the birth certificate, insurance, that kind of thing. She got very still. What do you mean about the birth certificate? Well, I assume you'll want my name on it as the father, right? But I was reading that there's actually a bunch of legal stuff involved. Like, apparently, you have to be married for the father's name to automatically go on there. Otherwise, there's paternity paperwork and waiting periods and stuff. This was mostly bullshit, by the way. I'd done some research, but I was deliberately muddying the waters to see how she'd react. Oh, she said, and I could practically see the wheels turning. I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, it's complicated. Actually, I was thinking maybe we should talk to a lawyer just to make sure we do everything right. My company has a legal department that handles family law stuff. The panic in her eyes was immediate and obvious. That seems like overkill for something so straightforward. I don't know, Rach. This stuff matters. Like, what if something happened to me? I'd want to make sure you and the baby were protected legally. And apparently, if the paperwork isn't done right, it can cause all sorts of problems down the road. I let that hang there while she processed the implications. If we involved lawyers, they'd start asking questions about timeline, paternity, all the stuff she was trying to keep vague. Maybe we should wait until after the first doctor's appointment, she said finally. You know, make sure everything is progressing normally before we get lawyers involved. When is that appointment again? I know you said you wanted to handle the first one yourself, but I'd really like to be there for the important stuff. Another flash of panic. Monday. But it's just a basic confirmation thing. Blood work, dating the pregnancy, boring medical stuff. You don't need to take time off work for that. Interesting. Dating the pregnancy was exactly what she wouldn't want me to witness, since it would reveal whether the timing matched up with our last intimate encounter. Well, what about the next one then? I definitely want to be involved. Of course. Absolutely. I'll let you know as soon as I schedule it. The rest of dinner was awkward as hell. Rachel kept trying to change the subject, and I kept steering it back to pregnancy logistics. By the end, she was clearly frustrated and suspicious. That night, she was on her phone until almost 2 a.m. Lots of urgent texting, lots of hushed conversations in the bathroom. The next morning, she announced she was going to spend the weekend at her sister's place to process everything and think about the future. Perfect. That gave me 2 days to execute phase 2 of my plan. See, while I'd been gathering evidence about Rachel's deception, I'd also been doing research on Trevor and Sarah Martinez, and I discovered something very interesting about their relationship. Sarah wasn't just traveling for work randomly. She was trying to get a promotion that required her to take on additional routes and prove she could handle extended travel schedules. It was a big deal for her career, and according to her social media posts, Trevor had been very supportive of her goals. In other words, Trevor had been encouraging his wife to travel more so he could cheat on her more easily. What Sarah didn't know was that while she was working her ass off to advance her career, her husband was planning to knock up his ex-girlfriend and potentially destroy their marriage. I figured she deserved to know, but I also knew that if I contacted Sarah directly, it might tip off Trevor, who would warn Rachel, who would disappear before I could implement the full scope of my revenge plan. So I decided to be subtle about it. I created a fake Facebook account, generic name, stock photo, minimal personal information. Then I sent Sarah a friend request along with a message that said, "Hi Sarah, I think we have some mutual friends from college. I came across some information that you might want to know about, but I wasn't sure how to reach you. Would you be open to a phone conversation sometime? It's regarding someone we both know. Alex." Vague enough to be intriguing, specific enough to suggest legitimacy. She accepted the friend request within a few hours and messaged back asking for more details. I told her it was complicated and sensitive, but that I'd rather explain over the phone if she was comfortable with that. By Sunday evening, I had Sarah's phone number and a plan for a conversation that would blow up Trevor's life while keeping my involvement hidden. The dominoes were starting to line up perfectly. Monday morning, Rachel left for her doctor's appointment looking nervous as hell. Before she walked out the door, she gave me this long hug and said, "Thank you for being so understanding about everything. I know this is all happening fast." If only she knew how fast things were about to happen. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then called Sarah Martinez. "Hi, Sarah. This is Alex. Thanks for agreeing to talk with me. Of course, I have to admit I'm curious about what this is regarding." I took a deep breath. This conversation had to be perfect, convincing enough to get her attention, but not so specific that she could trace it back to me. This is really difficult to say, but I have reason to believe your husband Trevor might be having an affair. Silence on the other end for about 10 seconds. "I'm sorry. Who is this again? How do you know my husband?" We have mutual acquaintances from college. I came across some information accidentally, and I debated whether to reach out, but I felt like if I was in your position, I'd want to know. What kind of information? Text messages, photos, evidence of them meeting up when you're out of town for work. Another long pause. Can you be more specific about these mutual acquaintances? I'm having trouble understanding how you'd have access to my husband's private messages. Shit. She was smarter than I'd hoped. I needed to redirect this quickly. Look, Sarah, I understand your skepticism. I would be suspicious too. But let me ask you this. Has Trevor been acting differently lately? More secretive about his phone? More interested in your travel schedule, less available when you're in town? I heard her breath catch slightly. How would you know that? Because that's what cheaters do. They create opportunities. Your job requires you to travel, which gives him perfect cover for an affair. I'm betting he's been very supportive of your career lately, right? Encouraging you to take on more routes? Telling you how proud he is of your dedication? Stop. Her voice was sharp now. I don't know who you are or why you're calling me, but this conversation is over. Sarah, wait. Check his phone. Tonight, when he thinks you're asleep, check his messages. Look for deleted conversations. Look for apps he doesn't usually use. I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. I'm asking you to verify what I'm telling you. She hung up. I sat there for a minute, wondering if I'd overplayed my hand. But then I realized it didn't matter. I'd planted the seed of doubt. Sarah was going to be watching Trevor more carefully now, and Trevor was going to slip up. Cheaters always do when they know someone's suspicious. Around noon, Rachel texted me. Everything looks good. Due date is early October. Can't wait to tell you all about it tonight. Early October. I did the math quickly. That would put conception around late January or early February. Right around the time Rachel had started being too tired for intimacy, but had been having all those mysterious weekend plans. The timeline confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't my baby. I spent the rest of the day putting together my final evidence package. Screenshots of emails, documented timeline inconsistencies, research on pregnancy dating, notes about Rachel's behavior changes. Everything organized and annotated like a proper fraud case. That evening, Rachel came home with takeout from my favorite restaurant and a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate our news properly. So tell me about the appointment, I said as we sat down to eat. Everything's perfect. Baby's measuring right on track. Heartbeat sounds strong. The doctor said I'm about 8 weeks along. 8 weeks would put conception in mid-January. We definitely hadn't been intimate in mid-January. That's great, babe. Did they give you any paperwork? Ultrasound pictures or anything? Oh, not yet. Too early for ultrasounds. Just blood work and basic measurements. Lieutenant, 8 weeks is exactly when they usually do the first ultrasound. When's the next appointment? 2 weeks. That's when we'll do the ultrasound and hear the heartbeat and all that exciting stuff. Perfect. I'll definitely want to be there for that. Her smile looked forced. Of course. We spent the evening making small talk about baby names and nursery ideas, but I could tell she was distracted. Her phone kept buzzing and she kept checking it nervously. Around 10 p.m., she got a call that made her face go white. I need to take this, she said, walking into the bedroom and closing the door. I couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but I caught fragments. Told you this would happen, and need to be more careful, and can't keep doing this. When she came back out, she looked shaken. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, just work drama. One of our clients is being difficult. Another lie. Rachel worked in marketing for a small firm that handled local businesses. Nothing urgent enough to warrant a 10 p.m. panic call. The next few days followed the same pattern. Rachel would go to work, come home acting normal, then spend the evening on urgent phone calls and text conversations she wouldn't explain. Meanwhile, I kept building my evidence file and waiting for the right moment to strike. Thursday evening, everything came to a head. Rachel was in the shower when her phone lit up with a call from Trevor M. Without thinking too hard about it, I answered, "Hello?" Silence on the other end, then, "Who is this?" "This is Brian. Who's this?" "I think I have the wrong number." "Wait, is this Trevor?" "Rachel's mentioned you." Another pause. "Yeah, this is Trevor. Is Rachel available?" "She's in the shower. Can I take a message?" "No, that's okay. I'll call back later." "Actually, Trevor, can I ask you something? Rachel mentioned you've been giving her some legal advice about pregnancy stuff. That's really nice of you to help out." I could practically hear his panic through the phone. "Legal advice?" "Yeah, about paternity paperwork and birth certificates. She said you have a lawyer friend who's been helping you guys figure out the documentation process. I think there's been some confusion. I haven't been giving Rachel legal advice about anything. Oh, that's weird. She specifically mentioned emails about paternity issues and timing concerns. The line went dead. I sat there holding Rachel's phone, grinning like an idiot. Trevor was about to have a very uncomfortable conversation with Rachel about why her supposed baby daddy was asking questions about their legal consultations. More importantly, Trevor was about to realize that I knew way more than I was supposed to know. 10 minutes later, Rachel came out of the bathroom to find me sitting calmly on the couch, watching TV. Any calls while I was in the shower? She asked casually. Yeah, actually. Trevor called for you. She froze. Trevor? Yeah, strange guy. When I mentioned you told me about his legal advice on pregnancy paperwork, he seemed really confused. Said he hadn't been giving you any legal advice at all. Rachel's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Oh, that's... He probably just misunderstood what you were asking about. Maybe. Or maybe there's something you haven't been telling me about your relationship with Trevor. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. Brian, I think we need to talk. Yeah, I said, standing up and walking to my laptop. I think we do. I opened my evidence folder and turned the screen toward her. I think we need to talk about a lot of things. Rachel looked at my laptop screen for maybe 30 seconds before her whole demeanor changed. The panic, the defensive energy, the scrambling for explanations, all of it just drained away and was replaced by something cold and calculating. How long have you known? She asked. Does it matter? I suppose not. She sat down across from me, suddenly very calm. What do you want? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected tears, denials, desperate attempts to explain everything away. Instead, she was treating this like a business negotiation. What do I want? You clearly have evidence of an affair. You know the baby might not be yours. You've been building some kind of case against me. So what's your end game here? Money? Public humiliation? Revenge? I stared at her. I want the truth. All of it. Fine. She leaned back in her chair. Trevor and I have been seeing each other for about 4 months. The baby is probably his, but there's a small chance it could be yours. I was planning to let you believe you were the father until I could figure out whether Trevor was willing to leave his wife. And if he wasn't, then I'd stay with you and raise Trevor's baby. You'd never know the difference. The casual way she said it, like she was discussing dinner plans, made my stomach turn. What if Trevor was willing to leave his wife? Then I'd tell you the truth eventually and move in with him. What about the 18 years of child support I'd be paying for a kid that wasn't mine? That would be unfortunate. Unfortunate. Like accidentally buying the wrong brand of cereal. And you don't see anything wrong with this plan? She shrugged. People make choices based on their circumstances. My circumstances changed when I realized Trevor was available. Trevor is married. Marriages end all the time. So you were planning to destroy his marriage, trick me into raising another man's child, and you think that's just practical decision-making? I think that's survival, Brian. You're a nice guy, but you're not going anywhere in life. You investigate insurance fraud for a living. Trevor is a successful financial advisor with a house in the suburbs and real earning potential. If I'm going to have a baby, I want that baby to have the best possible future. The complete lack of remorse was staggering. She'd planned to ruin multiple lives for her own convenience, and she was talking about it like it was a reasonable career move. What about Sarah, Trevor's wife? What about her? She doesn't deserve to know her husband is cheating. That's between Trevor and Sarah. I don't owe her anything. You don't owe me anything either? I've been a good girlfriend to you, Brian. I've lived here, shared expenses, been supportive of your work. This isn't personal. This isn't personal? You were planning to trick me into raising another man's child? And you would have been happy. You would have had a family, a purpose, something to care about beyond your boring job and your boring life. In a lot of ways, I was doing you a favor. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with someone who had made a mistake or gotten in over her head. I was dealing with someone who genuinely believed that other people existed to serve her needs, and that any manipulation required to achieve her goals was justified. Well, I said, closing my laptop, I guess it's a good thing I found out when I did. So what happens now? Now, you move out. And nothing. You move out, I move on. You deal with your situation however you want to deal with it. She looked surprised. That's it? What did you expect? I don't know. Threats, demands, dramatic confrontations? You've been building this whole investigation for weeks. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with. Now I do. She stood up. I can be out by the weekend. That works. Brian? Yeah? For what it's worth, you're not a bad guy. You're just not the right guy for me. After she went to bed that night, I sat in my living room thinking about that conversation. Rachel had been completely honest about her motives and methods, and she'd shown zero remorse for any of it. She'd treated our entire relationship like a temporary convenience while she positioned herself for something better. But here's the thing. I'd lied to her just as smoothly as she'd been lying to me. I wasn't done with Rachel. Not even close. See, what she didn't know was that my evidence file wasn't just for my own peace of mind. It was for Sarah Martinez, who'd been doing her own investigation since our phone call and was about to discover some very interesting things about her husband's recent activities. It was also for Rachel's employer, who had strict policies about using company resources for personal business. Policies that Rachel had been violating while coordinating her affair during work hours. And it was for Trevor's employer, where extramarital affairs with clients or partners could be grounds for termination in the financial services industry. Most importantly, it was for the legal system, where attempted paternity fraud is actually a crime in some circumstances, especially when there's evidence of premeditation and intent to defraud. Rachel thought she was getting away with inconvenience and embarrassment. She had no idea what was coming. Rachel moved out that Saturday, taking only the stuff she'd brought when she moved in 8 months earlier. She was polite, efficient, and completely unemotional about the whole thing. Like she was switching apartments instead of ending a 2-year relationship. The weird part was how normal she acted right up until the end. Made coffee in the morning, said goodbye like she was going to work instead of moving out permanently, even asked if I wanted her to pick up groceries later before catching herself. Sorry, she said. Habit. No problem. As she was loading the last box into her car, she turned back to me. You know, if circumstances were different, this could have worked out. If circumstances were different, you wouldn't have tried to trick me into raising another man's baby. Fair point. She actually smiled. Take care of yourself, Brian. And then she drove away. I spent the weekend cleaning the apartment and thinking about what came next. Part of me wondered if I should just let it go. Rachel was out of my life. I dodged a massive bullet, everyone could move on. But I kept coming back to what she'd said about doing me a favor. The complete absence of remorse or acknowledgement that what she'd done was wrong. The casual way she'd talked about destroying lives for her own convenience. Monday morning, I made the first call. Hi, Sarah, this is Alex. We spoke last week about your husband. I remember. I asked you not to call me again. I understand and I apologize for bothering you, but I have some additional information that I think you need to see. What kind of information? Documentation, photos, email correspondence, proof of what I was telling you. Silence for about 10 seconds. Can you email it to me? I'd rather meet in person. This is the kind of thing that's better discussed face to face. I don't know you. I'm not meeting with a stranger. Then bring someone with you. Meet me at a coffee shop, somewhere public. I just think you deserve to see this before you make any decisions about your marriage. Another pause. There's a Starbucks on 5th Street downtown, tomorrow at noon. I'll be there. Tuesday at noon, I walked into that Starbucks carrying a folder with copies of everything I'd gathered over the past few weeks. Sarah was already there, sitting with another woman who I assumed was there for moral support. I introduced myself and sat down across from them. Before we start, Sarah said, I need to know who you really are and how you got this information. I'd been expecting this question and had prepared an answer that was technically true but strategically incomplete. My name is actually Brian, not Alex. I apologize for the fake name, but I needed to be careful about how I approach this. The woman your husband has been having an affair with is my ex-girlfriend. I discovered their relationship while we were still together. So this is revenge? Partially, yes. But it's also about making sure you have accurate information about what's been happening in your marriage. I opened the folder and started laying out documents. Email printouts, timeline reconstructions, screenshots of text messages, photos of Rachel and Trevor together that I'd obtained from her social media accounts. Sarah looked through everything methodically, her face getting paler with each page. How long? She asked finally. Based on what I could document. About 4 months, but possibly longer. And she's pregnant? Yes. She told me it was mine, but the timing doesn't work out. According to her doctor, conception would have happened during a period when your husband was available, and I wasn't. Sarah's friend put her hand on her shoulder. Sarah, honey, are you okay? No, Sarah said quietly. I'm not okay. She looked up at me. What do you want from me? Nothing. I wanted you to know what was happening so you could make informed decisions about your life. And what about your ex-girlfriend? Rachel made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Sarah gathered up all the documents and put them back in the folder. Can I keep these? That's why I brought them. She stood up, then looked back at me. Thank you. I know this was probably difficult for you too. Yeah, it was. After they left, I sat in that Starbucks for another hour, drinking coffee and thinking about what I'd just set in motion. Sarah seemed like a decent person who'd been working hard to build a life with someone who was actively betraying her. She deserved better. Over the next few weeks, I watched the dominoes fall one by one. First, Sarah confronted Trevor. According to her later Facebook posts, he initially tried to deny everything, then minimized it as a mistake, then finally admitted to the full scope of the affair when she presented him with the evidence I'd provided. She filed for divorce within a week. Second, Trevor's employer got an anonymous tip about his unprofessional conduct with clients and associates. I may have mentioned in my tip that financial advisors who engage in extramarital affairs pose a risk to client trust and company reputation. He didn't get fired, but he did get formally reprimanded and lost his chance at a promotion he'd been working toward. Third, Rachel's employer received documentation showing that she'd been using company email and work time to coordinate personal matters, specifically an extramarital affair. She got written up for misuse of company resources and had her remote work privileges revoked. But the real consequences were more personal than professional. Trevor completely cut contact with Rachel once his marriage imploded. Turns out planning a family with your mistress is a lot less appealing when it costs you your house, half your assets, and your reputation. Rachel went from thinking she was about to upgrade to a better life to finding herself pregnant, single, and dealing with the fallout from a very public affair. She tried calling me a few times in those first weeks after everything came out. I didn't answer, but she left voicemails that started apologetic and got increasingly desperate. Brian, I know you're angry, but we need to talk. I made mistakes, but I never meant for things to get this complicated. Brian, please call me back. I think we could work through this if we just talked honestly about everything. Brian, I'm pregnant and alone, and I don't know what to do. I know I hurt you, but I need help figuring out my next steps. I deleted all of them without responding. About 2 months after Rachel moved out, I ran into her at a grocery store. She looked tired, stressed, obviously showing her pregnancy now. She saw me in the checkout line and came over. Brian, hi. How have you been? I've been fine, Rachel. How are you doing? It's been challenging. The baby's due in October. I know things ended badly between us, but I was wondering if we could talk sometime. Maybe grab coffee and clear the air? I looked at her for a moment. She seemed genuinely vulnerable for the first time since I'd known her. But I also remembered how easily she'd lied to my face for months. How casually she'd planned to destroy multiple lives for her own benefit. I don't think that's a good idea, Rachel. Brian, please. I know I made mistakes, but you didn't make mistakes. You made choices. Very deliberate, calculated choices. And now you're dealing with the consequences of those choices. I was trying to do what was best for everyone. No, you were trying to do what was best for you. Everyone else was just collateral damage. She started to tear up. I'm scared, Brian. I don't know how I'm going to handle this alone. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You should have thought about that before you decided to blow up your life for someone who didn't want you enough to leave his wife. I paid for my groceries and left her standing there.